Hello. Today we're going to be talking about channel strip routing on the API, signal flow, and other small features pertaining to the individual modules. Let's take a look. We have two individual fader portions of the strips. There are our fader 1s that span that lower region and have other parameters up here. Then, on top of those, we have fader 2s, which are a separate signal passing mechanism on that strip. Now, our fader 2s are primarily purposed for tracking. Their input is normaled to the channel input into the API. Our fader 1s below are mainly purposed for our monitoring and mixing. Their input is normaled to their corresponding monitor inputs for the API. Now we'll talk about how to route the signal out of the fader 2s to go to their corresponding desired input into our multi-track recorder. And then when arriving back from that multi-track, as it is normaled, we'll talk about how to monitor from these, send that signal to the mix buses that we desire. We have to take care of these simultaneously with our routing matrix. I will now step through. These are the matrices. They can be set with the various parameters and small buttons below. Now, any parameters for a matrix takes on the total settings of the white buttons that pertain to them that are set. So, you cannot merely do the settings for your fader 2s and then, without settings for fader 2s, go to do your settings for fader 1s. Let's set our fader 2 output with bus going to bus 1, making sure absolutely to select that this is the fader 2 output bus setting. If I set that here, setting the fader 2 on channel strip 1 going to bus 1, you see it light up indicating that this is a fader 2 output from that strip. But if I go to set something else, like monitor path for that strip, let's say going to stereo A with pan parameters, you will notice that the monitor path setting gets set, but it eliminates that fader 2 setting. We want to be taking care of these simultaneously, probably standardizing our fader 1 monitoring outputs across multiple channel strips as we set their fader 2 outputs. So, what did I do? Really, how did we route signal out of the strips and into their corresponding desired outputs? Let's take a closer look. Again, these white buttons are the parameters that can establish the settings, and then when pressing set, it applies any and all relevant settings to that matrix. We want to get the fader 2 output, as I said, to the bus that is desired. For 1, we'll be going to bus number 1. This is selecting that the output of whatever relevant fader will be going to bus 1. That fader we want to make sure is our fader 2, so we have to push the fader 2 button. This will establish once we hit set that that fader 2 output is going to bus 1. That bus 1 is normaled to our multi-track that is desired. Next, we also want to be establishing across multiple channel strips the monitor path, multiple strips that we're working with, the monitor path for the signal that is returning normaled from the multi-track to our ears. Let's say we want it to go to stereo bus A, that will ultimately be feeding our grand master that we are monitoring. And we want to be able to pan that within our mix, so we are going to preserve pan controls from that monitor output. These are our primary settings. Let us now go to set them. We have seen all of the relevant settings indicate here our fader 2 output and then the fader 1 feeding with pan controls stereo A. Next, I want to preserve the monitor output settings while changing the channel strip, the channel fader output for the next strip that we're working on. So I will remove the choice of bus 1 to be fed from the fader 2 and add bus 2. We are now going to set just like before. You can see that it has applied the same monitor output destination that we desire while giving that new channel output destination. Finally, when we are done setting all of our settings with the matrix, we can easily clear all of our white button settings. In the future, when you want to clear whatever settings you have on any one of these strips, you just merely press the set button again, and all will disappear when there are no relevant white button settings. So, let's take a look. We have, there it goes. Our signal on the buses that are being fed as we are currently feeding signal into these relevant channel strips. There we go. Now we can see on our multitrack, currently we're passing the signal through the shooter tape machine. Can you get a closer look? Look at them go. Now let's enable our hearing, our experience of these signals. We have them set so that their fader 1s down here, which are up and enabled, should be going to the Stereo Master A. The Stereo Master General Master, or Grand Master, is what we will be primarily feeling or hearing because we are monitoring that as our program monitor. This is our final decision as to what we're hearing, not what we're hearing them out of. There's separate capabilities for what speakers we're monitoring out of, but we'll talk about those later. Anyways, the program monitor that we're set to be hearing is set from the Grand Monitor. That Grand Monitor is now being fed by these other Stereo Masters. We personally, in Durgan, will not be changing these Grand Masters. We will be leaving them enabled because their added any interference or noise is negligent to us, and it is helping and aiding our purpose and ease to keep them on. So, let us fade up Stereo A, and now the Grand Master. We've got Steely Dan, the beautiful sounds of such jazz rock classics, beaming to our ears. That's a success. Let's talk about what we can do with the center console. There are several parameters like the one I just used, the dim button, which is a quick toggle to set to a predetermined lower amplitude for any of our listening needs or desires, be it needed. Now here, we can choose where we are metering on our primary meter part of the console. Looks like we're looking at the levels of the output for the fader 1s. You can see the pegs dancing right here. We can also choose what it is that we're listening to and monitoring particularly. As I mentioned before, the program monitor selects which Stereo Master or 5.1 regular or full down output signal that we will be hearing in the studio. Right now it's set to the Stereo Grand Master. If we wanted to monitor one of these separate devices, we would choose which corresponding signal we'd like, and then we would hit Play Monitor right here, switching our monitoring away from the program to the desired Play Monitor signal. Of course, we've got the staples, our primary level, the aforementioned dim switch, and also our alternate monitors that we can be monitoring from. These run the same signal that was coming out of the program or play monitor output and going to different speakers. Right now, we're just using our Bigs, the main speaker. Also, we have this handy little button that should be pressed at all times whenever the console is not being used, the All Cut. If you accidentally make a feedback loop, or get yourself in other sticky situations, or need to change all of the connections to disable everything, This is your friend. In a panic, they're there for you. Now let's take a look back at our modules and their several parameters. The fader 1s and fader 2s are functionally identical, just with different normals and slightly different parameters that we'll take a look at now. Both have solo, solo safe, options to change the actual signal input for those faders, panning options, including front to back pans for surround, which we won't be using, high pass, polarity reverse, trims, and other assorted things. Hey, hope you had fun today. Don't forget the API Essentials.